Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You were tuned in to How to Light an Interview Using Color, hosted by Nanlite. For that, I'd like to welcome Brittny Janae. Brittny, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. I always get nervous when I have people on doing lighting because I'm sitting here. You have me like I changed all my setup today. I'm like I gotta make sure it looks all right because I don't want to come on here and have you have to flame me to
No,
start the
I get
presentation.
nervous.
So
I feel like I'm not doing it justice because my camera broke. So it's like you're getting the Mac blended colors. So I can't even like really show you what it's really about.
no, it looks good. We see you know what you're doing. You got the accent lights going on there. And look, we're here not to judge your Zoom setup. We're here to, take in the information that you have to share with us. So I'm gonna let you do your thing. Of course, I want to send a huge thank you again to Nanlite for hosting today. And if you guys do have any questions, you know where to put them right in the YouTube chat. And that way we'll come back on at the end for some Q&A with Brittny. Brittny, take it away.
All right. Hey, everyone. I am Brittny Janae, and I am a filmmaker in Los Angeles, originally from St. Louis. And I like to throw that in there because I feel like my hometown is kind of what helped me get to the creative that I am and like with the visual aspect and the visual eyes that I have. So I always have to throw my hometown in there. But being in LA and being able to explore and learn a lot more. I think I'm like a blend of everything, and I feel like that's where my creativity comes from. So I just input that whenever I'm doing like an introduction. But today we are talking about lighting with color. So I'm just gonna pretty much get right into it and go to my desktop. So we're gonna bring this down, this up really quick. Okay, so again, I am Brittny Janae, and pretty much my focus is on documentary interviews. So I've done a plethora of them from regular, whether they're PSAs to commercial style slash documentary, all the way to the sit down talk type of interviews. And so I've been able to explore, learn, and grow and try to enhance the way I approach documentary interviews, including now being able to bring in color and create this whole world with that. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So as you can see, these are some of the things that I have done. But I really want to dive in and not just show you all how you can do something with color, but also just give more of the background and foundation to being able to just light in general and how color plays a part in that whole thing. So we're gonna light with color. First, why color? So color helps set the mood and tone of your scene. It creates a world for your audience. Now, when you're watching films and features and things like that, of course, with these scenes, it's very intentional based on what's being said, what's being done, the mood, the tonality. But with documentary interviews, it is a little different. And when you think about something like a documentary interview, they're really just sitting there talking about their life. But I think the reason why a lot of people don't necessarily go into documentary interview space is because they feel like it has to be this boring lighting, and it really doesn't. Like, you can do so much with it if you just be intentional with that as well. So if they're talking about like for instance, I shot Kelly Rowland, and she talked about her family and being a mom, and they wanted it to be lively and they wanted it to be color. And so that's pretty much what we did. And that's what you have here. Even for my YouTube, when I'm doing my YouTube talking heads, I want you to feel kind of like, I just want you to have a deep dive into the things that I'm saying. So I want it to be energetic. I have a very energetic personality. And so for me, I like to play with colors. I like to play with practicals, and knowing that you don't always need a bunch of lights, you can also bring in practicals as well. That's already in your scene, that may already be in your location. Like even now you can see my computer screen, my neon sign, all of these are practicals. And so, we're going to talk about being able to light with the Nanlites, and we're only using two lights. But outside of that, I really just want to hint at the fact that lighting comes from all different sources, backlights, practicals, all of the things. And so that's what I just want you all to remember, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't have a lot of lights. You don't have to. One or two lights is a-okay, and then learn how to use the practicals to create your inviting space. All right, so for instance, with this, we use the Nanlites, and I think let me make sure I even say it right, because I don't want to say it wrong for you guys. It was I feel like I get them both mixed up, the FC 500 and the FS3. I'm saying it right. Please correct me if I'm not. But both of these are full color lights. And I use those along with one of my favorite lights, which is the Pavo Slims. Amazing. And so today I want to show you all kind of two things that I did with those lights. Really, when you can only shoot with two lights, and then when you can also shoot with three, and what you can do with that. But again, you can use these as hair light, kick lights, backlights, all the things, key lights. And so we're going to get into that. So before we get into it, the first tip that I want to talk about is your key should always be constant. Now, when we talk about lighting with colors, I don't want you to have your key be a purple or a yellow or orange when you're doing documentary interviews, because then they're going to come out looking like a Oompa Loompa. So to me, I always make sure that my key is constant, whether it's tungsten, maybe 3200 white balance, or whether it's 5000 daylight white balance. You want your key to be constant. That's probably the biggest thing that I'll tell you guys is don't color your key, if that makes sense. Because again, your key is lighting the subject. Outside of that, that's when we create the whole world. So let's go into, for instance, this shot. This shot was lit specifically with the key. And the reason why, and if I would have added color, she would have looked weird. Now we're using blue and pink for the colors, but as you can see, like this looks like to me a very commercial like look lighting wise. I could have even went like a little brighter or brought in a reflector or anything like that, but you can see her skin tone looks really good. This is literally lighting with the FS 500, full color, but we decided to go with the CCT, and we're probably at 5000. And I want to say that my camera was at 5300. And so this is a standard, only your key. It doesn't have any color, but she looks beautiful. And even with that, if we go back into, let's see, if we go back into, sorry, these examples, you can see what they all have in common, which is their key is very constant. It's either going to be tungsten or it's either going to be daylight, depending on the mood and tone that you want. And so I'm always really just big on just pretty much make your key constant and let everything else flow. The whole point of documentary interviews is to make it feel a little bit more natural, unless you're trying to, expand and go outside of that. But overall, especially if you're like in a house setting or something like that, you want to make it feel as natural as possible. But with my examples, we're actually going to be creating this house-like look, as well as being in a psych where it's just all white, and you have to figure out how to bring mood and color to that image. And so that's the first tip. Make sure that your key is constant. Don't color your key unless it's intentional, which, like I said, when you go to films and you see they may have green, but that's because of the lighting of the world and not necessarily the lighting of their face. So don't color your key. A nice soft key is always delightful. If you look at these, they're not super harsh. They're really, really soft. And so you do want that. Now, a 500, why it's really, really good. It's like in the middle, and it's not like you can go with a 300, you can go with a 5, which is why I love both of these lights, because I feel like they're not too powerful, but they're just enough. And so any one of these interviews that you see, you could do with literally just two lights, your key light, and then maybe like a hair light or a backlight. But yeah, I love these. You see the catch lights in their eyes. So that's also like where you're going to put the light, which we'll talk about as well. Tip number 2, add in your backlights. So this is where you create the world. So when we go in and I start to show you all how we lit, you'll see that our key is constant, but the lighting comes from like how we want everyone to see everything around them and not just them. So like how you light your world, the world that you come up with, that's when you start to add color. So you're creating this world, and it's up to you to determine how you want it to look. But again, being intentional about that. If they're talking about something that's really dramatic, you may not want all these colors happening. But if they're talking about something that's very energetic, maybe you do want to add color. Maybe you just want to kick or a little hair light, or maybe you just want to go all out. So that's, you create your world when you add in your backlights or your kick lights and just different things like that, which this the Nickelodeon documentary, even though it was very intense, they did really, really well playing with color when it comes to this. And so that's why I really wanted to show this aspect, because it's so much more than just trying to add in certain things. They created this world. When you think of Nickelodeon, you think about color. Like when I was growing up, Nickelodeon was the jam. And so you think about color, you think about like how vibrant it was when we were kids. And so I really wanted to show this because I really love how they did each one. And color doesn't just come from lighting, it comes from production design, it comes from wardrobe. And so when you compare that, especially from a DP mindset, when you compare that to how you want to light, because it all kind of comes together, then I think it helps with your foundation of lighting, whether it is with gel or whether it's not. So for this photo, you can kind of see there's a kick light somewhere to camera right. And then there's some like probably tungsten going on around here, overall daylight vibe, but then there's some warmth on her face. For over here, you have a lot of this bluer, but then he has green. So they're adding color with like the backdrop, which is probably daylight, depending on like what their camera settings were. But then he has on his green. And so color doesn't necessarily always have to come from your lighting. It can also come from, you know, your set, your production design, your wardrobe, which also helps when it comes to lighting. So those are the two things that I would say when you are trying to light something. People always ask me as a DP, what should they wear? So not only do I try to figure out how to light it, I'm always trying to figure out what should they wear, because if I do want to add color in my lighting and it, you know, conflicts with what they have on, then there's a problem. So that's just a little tidbit. Again, I just want to give you all the foundation first, because I know we just jump right into lighting, but there's a lot of foundation that I want you all to learn outside of that, because we can teach lighting all day. And so, yeah, there's a lot of warmth going on. There's a lot of green, and you have the mixed temperature that I really, really like. And then even at the bottom, you have some warmth going on too. She has this very bright pink that's happening that makes her pop out. So even if if you think about it, every single one, look at all of their faces is very constant. So that goes back to tip number one. Their actual face for this documentary is very constant in color, but the word around them is what's drawing us in. So that's just goes back to the tip. And then tip number three, color theory. Now, I know a lot of times we talk about color theory in a scheme of complementing each other. You can see from all the way, if we go back to my YouTube, if you guys watch my YouTube and y'all see this, I really banked on color theory when I was trying to come up with my brand and how I wanted people to see my channel and what that looked like. And so I don't want it to be like where, when it comes to color theory, oh, if it's yellow, then it has to match with purple. Now, for me, I am African American and I'm darker skin tone. And so I look at the color theory as in, do I want to go more towards a warm side and then what colors are with that? Or do I want to go more towards the cool side and what colors are with that? So that's kind of how I look at color. Not necessarily, yes, also look at it as each individual color, but then I also want to look at like overall, what's the tone that I want to set? So I know for darker skin tone like myself, warm just looks really, really well. And so it just blends and it makes our skin tone very rich. And so for me, I want to go more towards the warm side most times that I'm doing documentary interviews, especially if it's a darker skin tone. Here you have a warm practical, but you can see towards the left, it's not so warm because he does have blue and it is kind of drawing it out with like the contrast of the overall image. And so again, it really just depends, but I'm more of a, let's go towards the warm side, especially when it comes to darker skin tone, because it just plays more into that. So that's another thing to think about, you know, think about your color theory. How do you want to play with that? How you want to mix your color? Do you want to bring your color out with wardrobe or do you want to bring your color out with gels? Just all those things because they all tie in together. So with all that being said, I know it was really, really quick. We're going to go into actually lighting. So let's go. All right, so we pretty much I'm giving you all a couple of examples when it comes to this because I wanted to try to be as thorough as I could. So we use the FS 300 and the FC 500. And again, I love these lights. You only need two. They're really, really great. And here we also have the Pixes that we use as a camera. But essentially I use the 500 as my key because it's the more powerful light. And then I use the 300 as more of like the color background light. And so if we go to, let's see here, this is one of the, actually, before we go to that one, let's go here. So this is the first one that we did, and this is just with the two lights. Later down the line, we did add a third light, but let's first talk about this. So automatically, the first thing I do, which is another tip, is I always set up my key first. Once you set up your key, you're pretty much good to go, whether you wanted to have a backlight or not. So I always try to set, I'm sorry, this is my friend Chai. She helps me out with everything. But so as you can see, that's the key. Like I said earlier, it looks very commercial. I could have stayed there and just kind of like added a reflection, but it can be a little bare. And so that's when you do want to add color and gels. Well, you don't need gels because of the light. And so this was like really good, and I feel like I could do something with this. But then to me, I'm like, okay, well, let's add the color and see what we can do, what world we can create with this. And this is all on a cyc. So the first thing you notice is that even though it's on a white cyc, the wall is actually more grayish. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about with that. So once you set up your key, which I usually try to set up about 6 feet away from my subject, and I think you saw early on, I also had a softbox. We added a softbox to it. And that's just gonna create like a really nice fall off on Chai, which as you can see, and you see the catch light in her eyes. And for me, I like to monitor the catch light. That lets me know where I'm placing my light and if I'm placing it good. If I don't see a catch light and I'm trying to actually shoot from like a 45, if I don't see the catch light, then maybe it's too high, it's too low, it's not in the right place. If I see a catch light, then I know, I did a pretty good job with where I positioned my key. So that's the first thing to note. We have some shadow on the side. Like this looks really good to me. But the reason why it is gray when you're shooting in a white cyc is because I actually position her way further from the background. And that's another thing that you want to do when you're doing documentary interviews, creating depth. You want to make sure that one, because you're going to be adding some color, you don't want it to hit them so harshly. So you do want to set them, especially if it's going to be background color, you want to separate them from that background. So that's why it gives you this like grayer look. So once we set up our key and our background, I make sure I turn all the lights off, because that's the only way you'll be able to like just make sure no lights that are already there are on, turn everything off, and then you turn on your key. The key looks great, and then you go and you turn on your backlight. So this is what we got with just 2 lights. And I went with purple because Chai loves purple. So I always ask, oh, what's the color that you like for talent or something like that? And she's like a purple girly, so we went with that. Now, with this, I will say, I think I was at 100 saturation as well as 100, probably 100 for it being dim. I didn't want it to be too harsh. And so that's kind of what we got, just a nice little fall off. And where this was positioned was literally hitting against the wall. So let me see where we have it. So you can see where she's sitting, and then where that background kind of falls and meets the wall. And then our key, we actually brought her up all the way to here, just so we can have even more depth. But let's see if I can find it. So you can see in the back, you can't see it as well, but like at first it was hitting the wall and it wasn't giving me what I really wanted. And so again, we're all students here, so I just really start playing around with like where to position the light, and I end up coming with shooting it off the wall to then fall, because it was falling really harsh. And for this particular one, I actually forgot to bring my spotlight, which is my favorite one from Nanlite. I forgot to bring it, so I was like, okay, when you only have 2 lights and you don't have nothing else, you got to figure it out. And so we hit it against the wall and let it just fall back on her. And so that's how we got like that nice natural spill. So because at first I was getting like very harsh light behind her. And so it even falls on her face as well. If you can see like the rim of her face, it falls very nice. And it's not necessarily a kick light, because you will see it more in her hair. It's actually a backlight. We're literally lighting the background. And she still looks beautiful. Her skin tone still looks great. But we did take it just from like an ordinary, just kind of having like this gray cyc to adding a little color. And this is literally with minor coloring. I didn't go crazy for this just to show you all. But this is just me adding a Rec 709 LUT. and a small creative LUT, and that's it. So that was pretty much what we had. And then we decided to show you all how we could actually light with three. So again, you can play around with any color. You can make it a kick light. You can make it a backlight. You can do whatever you want. But then for this, I wanted to just see what I can do with playing around with three, because I really wanted to find a way to blend color. And so I think that's where, like, if you did want to get into color theory, that's what maybe that would come from. Even with the Kelly Rowland, like I showed earlier, we played with a lot of the practicals in the space, adding some blue. She had on yellow and then adding some pink. And so I wanted to reinvent that as well for this particular shot. And so as you can see, we ended up adding the Pavo Slim. I think it's the 240, which is my favorite light, and it's super soft. And we did a top light because I love when it just naturally falls down on you. And so we did that, and we do have a grid on there, as you can see, because the thing about lighting with color is that if you do have all these lights, some might interfere with the other. And so before we added the grid, everything was blending in and you couldn't see the colors of the background as much as I wanted to. Once we added a grid, it made it more directional, only on chai, to where the backlights could really do what they needed to do. And so just thinking about things like that, like what modifier should I have? What, should I add a grid? Should I not add a grid? Just different things like that. So I had the FS 300 pink, and then I had the FC 500, like a purplish blue. Well, the camera decides what color it wants to be. And so that's how we end up getting more of this light. And the thing is, I actually cross colored them. And the reason why was because when I was just trying to pretty much have the blue on one side and just shoot out on one side, it didn't look that well. But when I shot them, it really came out like a gradient, a nice gradient. And even behind her, it's like the two colors can't really blend as much, and so you do get this like white behind her. And I really fell in love with this look. And this is something that you can do again. Like, I know, earlier you have a 2 light, this is more of a 3. But I really fell in love with this look, and you can pretty much interchange with whatever color that you want. And so you can still see the catch light in her eyes as well. In hindsight, now that I see it's at the top of her eyelid, I probably would have lowered it. And that would have also helped bring a little bit more light to her neck. Or if you want, you can use a reflector to bring some light, bounce some light back up. But essentially, like, I really love this. And if I need to go in and like color grade this, I think this would be a good starting place to do it. Her skin still looks really good. The color accuracy is really nice. And so I was excited about this. This looks really good. And so that's pretty much what we did with that as far as using the 3 lights. But essentially, before that, let me see if I can show you. So I end up playing around. So I did it one by one just to show you all what it would look like. And so here you have just the pink side being turned on and what they look like. Because I like to turn everything off and turn everything on one by one so I can see what each light is doing. And so, of course, again, I turned it off. And then for here, you got the blue. So you can see how much the blue is doing, what it's doing. Sometimes you can decide if it's too powerful. That kind of helps. And then when I brought in the pink, I did the same thing and just tested the pink, see what it was doing, and if I liked it. And then we end up bringing in ultimately the key. And then that's just kind of how it looks from like a wide shot of what we were doing. So, yep. And then the last thing when it comes to this particular one, so like, as you can see here, the blue, the pink, and then the key. So it's like, I like to just kind of see what they are going to do and make sure that they're doing what I need them to do. And then we did the opposite. So now we have the key, and then you see what the blue is doing by itself. And for this one, I end up bringing the FC 500 back to bring a little bit more blue, and made sure that I changed the hue and added the saturation all the way up. And then we bring in the pink, and I think the pink might have drowned it out a little bit. But essentially, that's what we got, which is the beginning of that one. So again, you really want to be careful when you are lighting with gels of like just trying to make sure you don't drown out your colors. Grids, I think we end up going, I don't know if you can see, because originally on both lights, I actually MacGyvered some diffusion, but then it wasn't doing what I needed it to do. So I just took the diffusion off and went really hard with them. Now, this is a really small cyc. Now, if you're going to shoot in a cyc, you're probably going to have a way bigger cyc. This is very small. And so there was limitations that we had as well. But I think overall, we did a really, really good job with it. The next thing I want to talk about, of course, you see what you can do lighting in a site, but I also want to show what, we decided to just kind of create this very casual living room scene where you would do a documentary if you necessarily didn't have money to or the resources to rent a site, but you're a documentary filmmaker and you want to go and interview in someone's home. How can you use what you have there with the FC 500 and the FS 300 and be able to do what you can still do and still do something amazing with it, because again, you really don't need a lot of lights. And so for this, we end up positioning Elaine. I wanted to do something different where it wasn't straight on and it was more like the camera was at a 45. So I really wanted to play in with what that would look like. And so the camera's at a 45, but you'll end up seeing that our key is actually straight on. And so this is at Chai's studio, and she already had some pretty much right here, she already had some practicals. And so we wanted to try to play off the practicals. And so we start playing around with a lot of stuff. For this one, I did have the spotlight, and that's where that blue is coming from. And I really love that spotlight. It's amazing. And so we were trying to figure out, this is the world that I was talking about. If you turn off all the lights, turn off your key, you really see what your world is doing without your key. And so that's why I say, once you get your key, figure out the world that you want to live in. So this was the first world that we wanted to live in, but it just wasn't doing us justice. So we went a completely different route. But I wanted to show that because I think a lot of people, we get stuck, and I won't even lie. I was stuck trying to figure out how I wanted to light, because when you're lighting with color, there's intentionality with it because it can go wrong real fast. So you just want to be mindful of, why you're doing it and how you're doing it. And so, yeah, I was having a hard time, to be honest. And so, we start playing around with a lot of things until we got what I felt like was really, really good. And so I also wanted to just mention that because I feel like when you watch us on YouTube and you learn from some of the greats, I don't want you all to think that we're also still not students. We're all still students, and we're all learning. And so this is me showing you all as I scrub through all the things that we were trying, and then what we came out with. And so that's a testament to just keep going, keep trying, and keep learning. And so this was originally what we had with the spotlight. So we had this blue that was falling because she had this peachy shirt on. Again, we were trying to figure out with the peach what would complement it. Overall, how could it look, what could it look like? So we had the blue, and then we had a practical here behind her, which was giving some nice warm vibes. And then we had this peach shirt that she had on. And then we weren't really vibing with that. And so we decided to start over and try something different. And so we had her put on jean. We had her put on blue. She has peachy hair. We changed the backlight, the practical, as you can see. And we were like, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to start over. So this is the raw. If you went to someone's house and you were like, all right, how are we going to light this with what we got? And we don't have windows like that in this house. And I know a lot of times when you learn lighting, most people are trying to motivate the windows. We don't have windows, and we were like, what can we do without trying to make it seem as if we have windows? And so that's what this was about. And so that's what it looks like at first. And then as we scroll, I end up taking the spotlight off and then just using the 300. And I literally, like I said, we just clamped on some diffusion in front because it was a little harsh. And then here you can see that I brought in the 500 and I put it directly in front. And that's kind of how it looks. 2 lights and then just some practicals that were already in the space. We end up not even using this practical. And so that's pretty much all you need. Again, 2 lights and figure out some practicals. Everybody has a lamp in their house. Get some Nanlite bulbs, which I also have. Screw that bulb in there, and that's a practical. And so always, I take a bulb with me everywhere I go, at least 1, 2 preferably, because I love symmetry. So if I could get 2 lamps or something, that'd be great. But at least I always take 1 bulb with me wherever I go, and I always ask, is it lamps there? Could we get a lamp? What can we do with that? Because practicals are very important. But our key and our backlight is the FC 500 and FS 300. And again, these are full color, so you can go CCT, you can go color, you can decide. Sorry for Elaine. Elaine is very energetic, so we're all an energetic bunch. So you're gonna probably see a lot of facial expressions. But this is what we came up with at the end. So we decided to play off of the practical that was already in the space, and it's more blue. Now, in hindsight, I probably would have tried to find another way to soften it because you can kind of see it's a little harsh, even with that diffusion in front of it. But it's more of a kick light. So as you can see, originally when we went and I did these were more like backlights. So they didn't really hit her as much. But now when you're over here, you see this is more of a kick light. So it is hitting the side of her face. We didn't have a lot of space in the room for me to kind of like turn it to where it wouldn't hit so much. So that would be something that I would probably go back and say, hey, let me figure this out. Let me try to move it in a way where it's not hitting so much of her. I don't mind the kick light. It's just that maybe it was a little bit too much because you can see it on her nose. And then of course, overall, you can see our key. We have some Rembrandt happening here. So the little triangle on her, on the other side of her cheek, and you see the catch lights in her eyes. So that to me looks really, really good. And then we have our practical in the back. And so that is pretty much what we ended up with, which I love. And so when we go to the end, which is here, that's the ultimate final look. So I think I might have actually, because now you see the blue, it's actually off her nose. So I actually might have fixed it already. And again, we were trying to use that blue, that color, to have it be like motivated from this this practical that was already in the space. And so the same way that you would try to recreate sun and bring a light in and have it be motivated by that, or have it be motivated by a lamp, we did the same thing when it came to this light. And so this we couldn't control because the bulb wouldn't fit in there. So it is a little harsh. But overall, I think I could work with this. If I wanted to go in and play with this, I could definitely work with this. And so foundationally, I think it's just a matter of knowing that you don't need too many lights. You need a key, and having like a nice hair or backlight or kick light is always going to be great. Playing around with practicals. Even if you did want to have a fill or a 3-light setup, you could do that. But even just having like a reflector, like all of these, we could have literally just had some kind of bounce, some kind of board that would have just like made it a little bit more softer. Those things are interchangeable, but I think with having that the FC 500 and the FS 300, I love the versatility of it because, like I said, I used to, when I first started off lighting, I didn't know about bicolor, full color, and I always bought daylight, and I couldn't do anything with daylight because sometimes you want to bring in more warmth. We're inside of a house right now for Elaine. And so the goal is to make it seem as if the light is coming from just a natural house light, or, you know, anytime you go in your house, the lights are always yellow unless you're a filmmaker and you have changed every light. But normally they're always like this warm, iridescent or tungsten light. And so we wanted to have it warm because we were inside. And so those are the things that I really like to talk about with the foundation, and then even modifiers. Like I said, we use the same modifier for both, which was the parabolic, I think the 90. Yes. And so we use this softbox. It's a pretty good size. It's not too big and it's not too small. And you know what they always say, the bigger the modifier, or the bigger the source, the softer the light, or the closer the source, the softer the light. So that's why I always say at least 3 to 6 feet away from talent is what I usually try to go for when I'm doing interviews, especially if it's one person and it's a small space. But even for both of these, I think they were only at 20%. So even though it's a FC 500, I'm not even using neither one of these lights at max capacity. Even with the 300, it was probably at 15%, because you want it to feel natural. So if you try to max output your light, it's going to feel artificial. It's going to feel very harsh. And so, you know, going really like to like 20, max that I usually do is 50. And that's if I'm putting the light a little further away. If it isn't in that 6 feet, 3 to 6 feet range, I'm probably saying around 30%, because it feels just more natural and the fall off is just a lot better. Even when we did the top light for this particular shot, I still had it at probably like 35 to 40%. So That is pretty much kind of how you would light with gels. Don't light with your key. And again, I want to say, yes, we have seen, when you go and you watch a film, you're like, well, why are they green or why are they purple? And it is solely because they are light the world in which they lit it is pretty much that color. They didn't light them particularly with color. So when you walk into a club, you might have all these lights reflecting off of you. But if you're doing any kind of interview or, you really don't want to add color to your key. Play around with your, if you want to go to more of a cool and more of a warm, and honestly, just have fun with it. Like we had a good time trying to get this together and figure this out. The first time when I play with Kelly, we had so much more. So even just think about it, like if we go back to it, this particular shot, we had way more space. This cyc is way bigger. And so we were able to kind of play around with a lot more. And I honestly feel like if you look at that and then you look at this, we pretty much got it. Now, again, I probably would have had a reflector because I didn't want to up the key because it would have washed out the colors behind. And so those are little things that I would say, a reflector, or again, playing around with like your key, just different things like that is very important. And so I think we did a really good job recreating it, literally with only two lights. I think we did phenomenal. So let me know what you guys think and if you have any questions. I know it was a lot, but I really just wanted to, first and foremost, I'm really big on, I can give you all my lighting setup. I can tell you what I lit with, but if you don't know the foundation of lighting, whether you're lighting with color or not, you won't really be able to recreate that in your own worlds, wherever you are and whatever you're shooting. So it was really important for me to lay down a foundation first before just kind of showing you all how you can actually do it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Brittny Janae, thank you so much. You're right. There was a lot of information in there. I'm going to try to, like, I'm over here and it's like, I probably have 500 questions I could ask you. I'm not going to get selfish now, but where do we start? Well, first of all, you brought up that Nickelodeon documentary, and it's funny because I watched it and color lighting with color wasn't even a thought in my mind. And then when you popped it up, I'm thinking like, what? And then I look and I'm like, wait, that's the dude from the. I'm like, oh, I watched that, and I'm like, I never even. So I guess it kind of goes without saying that when you do it right, it shouldn't really be like it shouldn't jump out to you. It shouldn't be like a thing that really calls your attention, right?
Yeah, it should all feel natural. Like this is the space. Like I think when you start lighting with color, sometimes you get very you just get really happy to do it that it doesn't blend well and doesn't feel as natural. And I think even with Nickelodeon, why I loved the actual interviews themselves is because one, they set the scene. We remember these people on set. We remember like our childhood. And so they set the scene already for us to go back to those memories. But then we also remember Nickelodeon's having so many different shows and color and vibrancy. And so that's why I think where being intentional matters as well. And they did it very subtle. It wasn't just like a in your face type of situation. It felt very natural. And I just fell in love with like what I was seeing. And like I said, it wasn't even just lighting with color with the lights. It was also with their wardrobe and with the overall set. So I thought that was really, really dope. And I feel like a lot of people we try to recreate with just trying to figure out lighting, but we forget that so much more goes into play with it. Like even if you think about my room, I have all these different colors happening, but ultimately it comes down to like my whole set. Like what do I want you, like I want this to feel natural and like hopefully like even with this computer, the bluish is from the window, so it's just like it naturally is falling everywhere. Like of course this practical here, but everything else it just feels natural. If you look at my YouTube, a lot of people are always like, your talking head looks so good, but it just feels like homey. It feels like I didn't try, and that's the goal. It's like it's to feel homey, like you didn't try. You don't know where these lights are.
Practice restraint. A lot of people need to learn how to do that. I want to go back to something you had just mentioned and also mentioned earlier, the whole idea of wardrobe and skin tones. And it's like, we all, of course, we say, black, white, but it's like there's tones. It's like I might have a little more red to my skin. I might have a little more yellow to my skin. how does that play in to the lighting? Is there certain colors that are going to play better based on a skin tone? And then how do you, if you're doing a documentary and you might have three different people and they're three varying skin tones, and maybe one is a more dominant, like, all right, this one doesn't play well with others as far as like, one color looks really good on it, and then another color might look good on two of the other people, but that doesn't look good with this person. How do you manage that?
So when it comes to that, one, I try to make sure that whoever the lightest person is, they're not right by the light. Cause then it's just gonna,
It's always me. It's
you know.
always me.
So like if I'm interviewing you, if someone is interviewing me and you, and I'm a little darker than you, well, I'm a lot darker, but if I would say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be so close to the light because I mean you shouldn't be so close to the light because you're gonna get hit the most, right? So if the light is directly hitting you, you're already a lighter complexion. And so I usually try to have like a darker complexion sit a little closer to the light because they need that light. That's happened to me before. Now, if it's like multiple people in it, like the lighting is looking good on one, I always try to make sure that I expose like in the middle. But I don't want to like expose completely for the darker because then again, you may be washed out. So I always try to find that balance of what that looks like. And usually I think it's between like 50 IRE ish. But I think also like thinking about modifiers, right? So unbleached muslin gives you more of a warm, feel. So if you're using unbleached muslin in front of your FC 500, just to kind of like and bounce off of it to kind of give a warm vibe, then you have to know that everybody's going to be warm. Or you can use bleach muslin, which is, more cool. So for, I think unbleached works well for both. So I think learning it's not necessarily just learning your lighting, but it's also learning how modifiers play a huge role in your lighting and how the output of what that looks like. Anything you put in front of your light is going to change your output and it's going to change how your light looks, right? And so like learning that aspect of it and what that does to the overall image is important.
You can see that experience coming through. It's like even bleached versus unbleached. I'm like, all right, white muslin is white muslin. I'm over here like trying to take
Wait,
notes. I'm like,
but not even just that. When I first started doing my YouTube channel, I didn't have money and I was using like a white linen bed sheet that I had bought a new one. So I was like, all right, what am I gonna do with this? So I was using a white linen bed sheet to put in front of my light to just have it soft before it hit me. And even that, like it was white, so it was more of like it hit like straight through daylight. And so like learning how if I'm gonna put that white linen in front of my light, what do my white balance need to be? Like, is it interfering or creating a different color tone for me? So like all that kind of plays a part. And it's really just practice, practice, practice.
hmm.
So
Now it kind of goes into a question we got in regarding white balance. Do you always match your white balance to your key light temperature, or do you ever adjust the camera white balance for a different effect?
I don't always match my white balance. I think even for my YouTube, I usually try to make sure like I'm probably at 5,000 for my camera, and then I usually probably have like 56 for my light. And the only reason why is because I'm using a lot of practicals which are warm. And so if I and I have a lot of day I have daylight from my window. And so in order to mix temperature, so you have warm and then the daylight is more blue. So in order to mix temperature and bring that more bluer feel in, I really want to go up to like 5,000 or 56 for like my key or my main to make it seem like I'm wrapping that window, and then everything else is just warm from my practicals. So it really depends on overall kind of like what you want to go for. I think originally for the first shot that I had with Chai with the colors, we had it at 3,200 for the lights, and then I think I bumped it up after I wanted to get more like intensity in my lights because depending on your white balance, that's going to depend on your intensity with your color. So and like what your color looks like as well. Because at first we were getting a lot of blue when I was changing the color to purple. But then when I changed the white balance, I'm like, oh, it is now purple. So it really just depends and with how you want it to like look. But again, your white balance is if you are playing with color, your white balance will change the color. So
This is all stuff, and this is where it's important, I think, for people to just get out there and experiment with it. Because it's like you said, if they're just going based on what you literally say, and then they're gonna go out and it's like, well, the difference between like you said with the cyc wall, it's like, well, a white cyc wall, if you light it right and the model or the whoever you're shooting is right up on it, yeah, it's going to look white. But then
Yep.
when you bring the light source away, when you bring them away, it's going to create gray, and you can go all the way to like a dark gray. So it's all depends on proximity and power and all that stuff, right? In addition to then on top of your camera settings, and the list goes on.
Yeah, I think colors should be like the last thing we think about, right? So like when I set up those lights, I knew that I wanted to add color, but that wasn't kind of like that wasn't the focus of like how I wanted to set up, right? So I'm setting up naturally with what I know, the foundation. Take talent away from the back, whether you're shooting with color or not, they need to be away from the back. That creates depth. And when it's just a sight, you really don't have that much depth anyways. But if you're going to be adding color, then yes, you don't want them to be so close because the color is just going to hit them so much. And that's what happened to Chai. It was hitting her so much. And so when you bring them further away, that white becomes gray real quick. And even when you color, there's times where you can see it more blue. Like it really just depends. And I didn't even go in crazy with the color, but really like learning the foundational aspects of how to light and then playing around, which is why I was like, let me show you guys me messing up and playing around because that's how you learn and that's how you get. And then you might see something that you actually really, really like. And that's what happened to us. We fell upon it and I was like, I really, really like this. This is it. This is where I want to land. And so because it's not a one size fits all kind of thing when you're lighting, especially when you're lighting with color, you really have to play around. And then once you start getting those things, you kind of start to know if you go into a thing with a client or with somebody, oh, I play with this, I practice this is exactly how I want to do it. And so me being able to shoot the Kelly Rowland, I knew where we put the lights. And so I just pretty much recreated that, but I still had some maneuvering that I had to do because again, it's a smaller site. It's a lot different. So I don't want people to think that if I teach you exactly this, it's going to work for you. I want you to learn the foundation so that wherever you are, it'll work for you in a different way.
It's stressful enough when you have to, especially when you're working with high profile or celebrity clients, and you have to worry about just like bicolor and like how you're gonna light it. I can't even imagine you got to throw color in, and color's like a whole nother world. Color, you make it look great, but as anybody who has ever tried to do it, it's not easy. It's hard to just go in there and kind of wing it. And especially, you don't want Kelly Rowland sitting there and you're like, okay, wow, this looked great on YouTube, but now it's not
Yeah.
working. So, I mean, it's something that you really do you test out everything, especially on a job like that? Are you down to like pulling in somebody with the same complexion just to make sure that, because like you bring up a great point about the color spilling. Like if you don't have a lot of people, not everybody's working with a lot of space. Sometimes you have that really tight space, that light is going to bounce.
Hmm.
Your scene might be, you don't always have room to get something in to flag that color from spilling onto the model. So how intense are you with testing it out, or is it just experience at this point?
So well, a lot of it is experience. I just know, like, even with the Kelly, I knew I wanted to have color because they wanted to match color from what the photographers were doing. And crazy enough, unfortunately, we didn't even have color lights. So luckily for these, the Nanlites, they already come with color. We were struggling. So that's why I mentioned like when I was first learning, I didn't even know about full color. I didn't even know about bicolor. I knew about daylight, and that was a struggle. But now being able to have something that's full color does make it easier. And so I think that was why we were able to recreate that a lot faster. We had a full day to like Ellie, like
Oh,
so
that's all right.
but you may not always have that. Again, we've had a bigger site. Like that's why I wanted to show those two in like this smaller location and not even using a bunch of stuff because I want people to understand that like I know it can be a little intimidating when you feel like you're watching someone that has all of this stuff and they're in this rented out, space, but like no, Chai Studio, she has a lot of different rooms, but they're small. And so this is kind of what we can do. And so just being able to work with one light first, being able to learn two lights second, and then I think people automatically see stuff and they're like, oh, we got to have all these lights. But like, no, if you don't know how to perfect the key, you can't perfect the key and a backlight. So like, that's what I try to do, like figure out what I want my key to look like. Earlier I said I love top light, but it wasn't until I practiced with it where I was like, I like how this falls a little bit more than a 45-degree angle. And so really just move your lights. And there's times where like I get it with some of my friends and I'm like, yo, I kind of need to practice this. I want to see how this looks. I go on like a lot of apps and I find inspirational photos that I like really like the lighting. And I really try to dissect specifically where the shadows are because then I know where the light is coming from. And like, so instead of just being like, I want to recreate this, I'm like, okay, I like what this shadow is doing. So that means the light is to the left of him. And I like the background has some fall off on the floor. And I like that. So maybe I do need two lights or I could use this window. Like I really try to go in and dissect. So before I even practice physically touching a light, I literally download inspirational images from like maybe interviews that I've seen, even like the Nickelodeon interviews. I was dissecting like, okay, I like the color, but I also like the key and how it's very soft. And I also just like how it's more full. There's not a lot of shadow. The shadow is all the way more. They don't even have a lot of Rembrandt. It's like all the way. And so they must have used a bigger source. And so those are the things that I try to like, focus on before I even touch a light. Let me dissect it mentally first and then physically go out and try to recreate or shoot.
All right, you already know I'm a 45-degree person based on this. I gotta
Yeah.
ask, what is it about the top light? And you know what? It's a trap I fell into. 45 degrees. It's so easy, and for us lazy people out there, it's so easy to just stick with it. Top light is intimidating because it doesn't work on everybody. But what is it? What is it for you? I wanna expand my knowledge base here and maybe start experimenting more.
I feel like top light is more natural.
Okay.
So like if I look at you, I can look at your image and say, okay, I see some nice shadow, there's some nice fall off, but because it is, I'm like, it could be a little hot, so I feel like it could be a light. Now, most times you're in a house or anywhere, light comes from the ceiling because lights are, whether it's a lamp, like a tall lamp that you have in your house, or whether you turn a light on in your house, it's coming from the top and it's a fall. Even the sun comes from up high and it's a fall. And so I learned, no brag, but I had to shoot behind the scenes for Insecure, which is Issa Rae's show. And all they did was use top light. And it's such a beautiful series. And I was like, that's it. They use top lighting and practicals. And I'm like, how? But it was a beautiful fall off. It just felt more natural. And I just fall in love with it. I think what people get intimidated by is that you can't put it directly over you. Cause then you start having a raccoon eyes. You actually have to put it like a little, you have to be on the edge of the top light so that it can actually spill down. So I think it's a matter of trying to move it and figure out where it can really go to have that nice fall. I think that's what people are intimidated by. But the top light is very, very beautiful. It's beautiful.
I'm intimidated. I got a huge nose. I'll keep it above. I don't want that shadow. The shadow comes down and touches my chin if I don't do it right. All right, I'm gonna have to experiment with that.
I think with the 45, because I love a good 45. I have a 45, but I think with the 45, what I love is that you don't need a lot of lights for that. Because
Yeah.
sometimes with a top light, you might need a reflector to bounce, especially, if it's super high, you might need to bounce it. But with, you got your Rembrandt going on, the 45 is really nice. You can get it really soft depending on if you have space. Um, and like I said, everything that is on my YouTube, my talking heads are with a 45. So it's really soft and it feels natural. And so I love a 45 and it kind of helps with like, going underneath the chin because the top light, it can't get under there. So unless you have that bounce. But with a 45, it can do enough. And then you can have nice roll off if you like position your modifier right. It can 45. I don't hate a 45 now. I love a good 45. But I think as I learn more about the different, movements with lights, top is definitely one of my favorites for sure.
All right, put it on my list. Final question here. When do you know, like with color, sometimes it's a little stronger, sometimes you want it more subtle. Is there any situation like how does the decision to incorporate color and how much color to incorporate come in? Does that have to do more with the aesthetics of what you're going for? Or does it have to do with the subject matter? How do you go into that decision?
I think it's both. I think you want to be. I think so. I was just on set with a DP, Shane Hurlbut, and one of the things he said to me that really stood out was when it came to camera movement, he was like, a lot of people just move the camera, but there's no intention behind it. He said if you read the script, you'll see that the script tells you when to move your camera. And I think it's the same with lighting, and I think it's the same with lighting with color. Like when you learn someone's story, if it's documentary interview, or if you're shooting a short film and somebody, there's a scene that you can feel, and as you imagine it, you can feel when you need color and how much you need. I recently just shot a short film, and there was some scenes where, like, as I'm reading the script, I'm like, this needs some tubes, this needs some color. And so I feel like, and then again, I always take some bulbs with me. I'm always like, I gotta have some bulbs. And so I think when you start to be intentional about like reading the script or learning someone's story, if it's a sad story, you might not want to go crazy with the color. You may not want it to be super intense. And that's why I like Nickelodeon's, because it was very intense stories happening here, but the color didn't make me feel excited. I was still very sad about what was happening because it felt so natural, and they didn't go crazy with it. It just felt like we were in this set in their bubble because they're talking about being on set. So it just made me feel like I was actually on set. And so I think when you be intentional in that way, you know when to go crazy, when to not, when to use color, when not. So
So much good information here. This is like a bookmark and go back and rewatch. And I think leave it up to a filmmaker to use the Adobe Premiere instead of like just slides. Like you got to throw the Adobe Premiere timeline in there. Made it so I'm like, I like that. That's effective.
yeah, because I mean, it still comes down to your post workflow too, right? So, like,
Hmm.
even when you're finding your color on set while you're shooting, and then you get into post and you enhance that. Actually, before we go, I do want to show like what I
Yeah,
did.
go for it.
So, even in Premiere, if I go to my adjustment layer, let me see if I can move it. I went into my hue versus saturation, and I even bumped up my saturation, right? So like, it doesn't stop at just how you light. It's from the beginning all the way to the end. So if I just take this off, it's not as, contrasty. The color isn't, at least. But if I turn it on, and it's subtle. It's really subtle. But you can see you see the blue go away.
Yeah.
So I really just played around and brought that blue up. The same thing with the purple. If that goes away, and then I just brought it up just a hair. And so again, it goes from the beginning to the end. So just don't think about lighting in a sense of what you're doing on set. You kind of got to go all the way. You got to do the whole process. Like, so.
That's a bonus tip right there. I don't think I've ever gone in and adjusted that based on the color channel. So
I love hue versus saturation and hue versus hue, because even then you can change your color if you do hue versus hue. So if I didn't like the blue, I could change it to a whole different color, or so like, and that's another thing with skin tone. So there's times where if Chai was a little more washed out, or if I felt like, all right, the it's washing her out, I would go to hue versus Luma, and then from there I would go between her skin tone. And if I go up, you see how it brings the highlights up a
mm,
little in her face?
yeah.
So I could easily, play around with just all of those to give me that image. And that's why I was saying this was like slight movement. Like I said, if we go to the purple and I didn't want it, I can change it, you know? So there's, it color just is from the beginning all the way to the end. But if you do it right while you're shooting, you don't have to go crazy too much in post. But I always say, that's why I say learn the foundation and learn the process. Because color, it could be a whole thing.
Color's everything. I mean,
Exactly.
look at like most of what you respond to, like when you watch movies. 9 times out of 10, when you the visual is like movies are always lit well. They're always shot well. It's the color, like the color grading, or if there's like a nice monochromatic theme, or I mean, it's why you walk into some people's homes and you're like, wow, like they know how to decorate, and the next
Yes.
person doesn't, because it's like it's that harmonious color palette does so many, it evokes so much from us and so much feeling. So I think the same goes for if you're watching an interview and it's like it kind of plays in, it's like the very seen but not often thought about dynamic of like you want an interesting story, you want dynamic characters, but that sets the tone paired
Yeah.
with the lighting.
And I think mentally, if it feels natural when you color and you light natural and it feels right and it's right, you mentally you don't even realize that when you're watching a show that like you're so into like the color scheme. You're so like that's what draws you in because it feels so natural in the environment. But they did it on purpose. They did it with intention. And we're just watching it like, oh, this looks so good. But it's like, yes, we got
Oh man, Brittny Janae, thank you so much. I'll be back tomorrow with my top lighting, everybody. No, let me stop. I gotta work on it. I gotta work on it. I'm
but
gonna
you know what? You
experiment
can do,
more.
you know what? Use the FC 500 as your 45 and go ahead and put that 300 up top and go ahead and have a little, separate you from your background with the
There we
hair.
go. I'll get a little bounce up under
The
here.
hairline. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Man, I'm gonna come on a new changed person tomorrow. I'm gonna pull out every light in the kit.
Yes.
Oh,
Do that.
uh, this was such a really, really, really great presentation. You really broke everything down beautifully. And color, what more can you say? Color is everything. I mean, to me, I think that's really what sells the emotion of anything we watch. So Brittny Janae, huge thank you to you. We did drop you a link to your YouTube, so please go subscribe. Of course, support everybody who comes on our wonderful platform. Huge thank you, of course, to Nanlite as well for
Yeah.
hosting today's event. And that is it. That's all we got for you for now. Another edition of the B&H Event Space, and now in the books. Catch y'all next time.